Good afternoon, everyone. This is going to be the third and final video about the Sharp QT12 and my attempts to add Bluetooth to it. So I'm doing this intro after it's all done to do something that I don't do very often, which is tell you what happened. And what happened is the Bluetooth adapter is not working, which you might have guessed might be coming from part 2 of this video. So what I'm going to do in this one is explain why I decided not to go that route, and then I'm going to show you the route I went, which was to put an audio in on the side instead of a Bluetooth switch. So let me get right to that. And well, now you know that Bluetooth did not work going into the video. So my little power supply boards have come in. So let's have a look at that, and then we'll cut back and look at the radio and see how these might work in it. These are really quite neat. Let me bring the camera down some more. Let's see if that works. I guess we could zoom in. So what this is this is a little buck converter. There's a little buck converter chip here. Oh, that's not a very good pointing thing. There's a little buck converter chip here. There's the inductor. There are a couple of output capacitors. And it's got, you'll see that there's a set of resistors here, and this is the sort of electronics associated with the converter chip. Let's flip on the other side and we can figure out how it works. Okay, so on the other side, what we have is we have a series of solder bridges that you can bridge to put it in different modes. So 1.8 volts, 2.5, 3.35 volts, and there's also adjust, which then uses this little pot here to adjust the output voltage. So if this thing works, this is going to be quite useful. So we've got voltage in, we have voltage plus and ground in, and I assume this is voltage input ground. I'm not sure. Or does it have a single ground plane? It might have a single ground plane for the whole thing. We'll figure it out. So this is what I'm going to try to use. I think this is in, because that's coming up here. Yeah, that goes directly to the chip. So that's going to be ground there. But we'll see. Unless that might be, I'm not sure. I'll have to see if I can find a description. I just ordered this from Amazon, but these things are available in slightly different versions all over the place. So what I'm going to do is I'm charging up the soldering iron, and we will give this a try and see if it works. If so, I will open up the radio, replace my existing power supply with this, and see if that solves the interference problem with the Bluetooth adapter. If it doesn't, then we'll go to another route and not put Bluetooth inside it, and I will show you how I'm going to do that. If it does work, then problem solved. I will fix the wiring so that it's a little bit better, and then we'll button that up and call it a finished project. So one thing at a time, we'll start with checking out this little power supply. This does seem to work as advertised. I'm not getting quite the right voltage, but I was just sort of laying leads into this as opposed to trying to solder it, because desoldering these little holes is going to be difficult. So I didn't want to give that a go. It does seem to work. It seems to be giving reasonable voltages considering, and I was driving it with 10 volts or so. All right, so here's the existing wiring, and this is the power supply essentially coming off here. So we'll wire this in instead. All right, I hooked it up. You can see there's the power supply board there. It's working. I'm getting reasonable voltage on this. This is functioning. However, I'm still getting interference into the radio. So I'm going to abandon the plan to put a a Bluetooth receiver in this radio, and I'm going to instead replace this with an audio in. That would then let me use any sort of external Bluetooth device, of which of course I've got one, to power this. And I think, at least for this particular Bluetooth board, we're going to have to say this is not appropriate for putting it inside a radio with, you know, from the 80s. All right, so let me cut all this out, wire up the new plug, and then we'll talk about that a little bit. Apologies for the background noise for this, but I want to show you what I'm going to replace the switch with. And that is with this, which is just a standard 1/8" plug, or jack, which you can put an 1/8" stereo plug in. So here's an 1/8" stereo plug, we'll plug it in like that, yeah, and that will work fine. Now, no switch is required with this style of jack, and let me explain how it works. So you'll notice that, and this one is conveniently clear on the side, so you'll notice that at the moment this contact here is pushing on this contact here, and this contact here is pushing against that contact there. The ground, which is the sleeve at the top, is always connected to both sides. So when you plug this in, see, it disconnects, this disconnects from here, and this disconnects from there. So the idea is this is your normal audio in. When you plug in a plug, it's disconnected and replaced with whatever's coming in the audio in here. So this is the way all these work, but this one is conveniently clear so you can see how it works. It fortunately fits nicely in the hole that I've already drilled in the side, although I did need to trim it down a little bit because this has a much shorter sort of stem on it. So I'm going to go and attack the mess of wiring and try to figure it out for this. I'll have to figure out how the various pins line up. My memory is that the tip is right and the middle sleeve is left, but I'll double check that before I wire it in. Anyway, I just wanted to show you guys that before I put this in. This is, by the way, the simplest modification one can make on a boombox like this, and I've been meaning to do this on my Sanyo for a while and hadn't, but then I got sort of, you know, it'd be nice to have the Bluetooth inside the device, but obviously there's too much noise. Noise is too much of an issue when they're sharing the same power supply. So, yeah. Oh, and I used a countersink here just in my fingers to bore that out a little bit more so that I'd have room to tighten it down okay. All right, so let's deal with the wiring and then let's see if it works. So I've wired up the jack. I was wrong. The first sleeve is right. So this is right, and then the tip is left. So it's all wired up. And I had to use the multimeter to beep out which was sort of the in where the switches were. The pins thought they made sense, but they were both backwards to what I thought they were. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is clip out the switch, screw this in, and then get my little plan, and we'll solder this in place and see if it works. I think I've got the wiring hooked up properly. There's the jack, runs through. This is a bit of a rat's nest because of course I've been through it before. It would be neater if I hadn't, but that's not too bad. The only thing that I've cut into here that I wouldn't need to are the ground and the power, which I wouldn't have needed to. I mean, I would have had to go into the ground actually. It's using the same ground plane, but I didn't have to go into the power. That's this orange wire back here, and you can see that's just bridged through. For the ground, I used the existing sort of splice and pulled off of that just because I was lazy. All right, so the whole thing's wired up with more flexible wire. I'm going to plug it in and we'll see if the radio still works, and then we'll try an external source. Okay, well, this is all wired up. Let's show what we got. So that's the radio, working fine. Both speakers are working. Now we'll plug in this iPod Nano, because that's fun. And that works perfectly as well. So, no question that this is the better modification than to try to put a Bluetooth receiver inside the radio. Now, it may be that there are some other Bluetooth receivers that work better than the one I tried, but not too much luck here. Anyway, and of course you can adjust the volume down on whatever your source is as appropriate. All right, so that works fine. So I'm going to put this back together, try to route these wires in, and then we'll try it again once it's all together. I haven't put the screws in yet, but here we are. It's all closed up. I've got the knobs on.
By Noel Coward.
So
Charles,
there we go.
a novelist,
Radio.
invites the great Madame Arcadi to conduct a seance.
Plug in. And little iPod driving it now. Unplug it.
At the Shaw, on stage
Back to
now.
the radio.
For tickets, go to Shawfest.
So I think this is a successful project, but it's not the project didn't work out the way I wanted it to. The reality is that those little Bluetooth receivers generate too much interference. Oh, I'll have to, there we go. Free that up. I'll have to check the cassette mechanism. That's why I don't have the screws in yet. This is working fine. We're able to bring in, I'm using this little iPod, but you could use any Bluetooth dongle. I just don't know where I put mine right now. That would be fine, a Bluetooth adapter of whatever, you can plug it into the side. I mean, the downside is you don't have the whole thing in one box, but the upside is, well, we don't have noise from the Bluetooth receiver permeating the whole radio, which seemed to be unavoidable before. But, you know, radio works. And there we go. And back to the radio. So, you know, fairly straightforward to do. All you have to do this is get it to the wiring harness, and you know, it's just the left and right channels going from the radio to the amplifier side. In most of these radios that I've seen, the radio board is separate from the amplifier board, and that makes sense because the radio boards would be different for different markets. So that means that you have a wiring harness which you can get into. Now, a better way to do this would be, in fact, to build a plug, right? So that you could unplug the wiring harness, plug in your new wiring harness, and then you don't have to solder and you don't have to mess up the existing wiring when you do it. I may try that if I ever do another one of these, but if you're already going to drill a hole in the side of the case, I'm not sure that I'm that concerned about it. Anyhow, as I was saying, this is not the way I thought this project would work out, but this is a perfectly fine solution to the problem of getting a modern sound source into an 80s boombox. Hope you've enjoyed this rather long series of videos about this QT12 Sharp, and this will probably be the last one. I do have a thought about getting the cassette deck working properly, but I really think that I'm not going to get to it, and that is, really, there are a few things that aren't working well, and the idea of disassembling it, mostly cleaning it, re-greasing it, and putting it back together, and then putting the auto stop cam in at that point, I wouldn't be totally shocked if it would work if I did that. but that's far more effort than I think I'm willing to take at this point. All right, once again, thanks for watching. Have a good afternoon.